Hello and welcome to Press TV News Analysis. I'm Kaveh, beginning this news analysis with Indian-controlled Kashmir, where over a dozen Kashmiri protesters were killed in one day. And that's the highest in the last 3 months of pro-independence demonstrations in Indian-controlled Kashmir. There are reports that the burning of Muslims' holy book, the Quran, in the United States fueled the latest round of protests.
Police say that it's the worst day of violence since mass demonstrations against Indian rule began 3 months ago. Security forces opened fire on tens of thousands of protesters in the Budgam and Tangmarg areas.
We're fueled by alleged desecration of Quran in the United States. Major incidents happened in Tangmarg town where police opened fire, and according to police sources, around 5 people were killed in that particular area. And later, this violence spread around the region. And I can tell you that the pro-independence leaders had already called for a march towards the local United Nations office today. In wake of that as well, people also took to streets protesting against the Indian rule in Kashmir.
Police say that it's the worst day of violence since mass demonstrations against Indian rule began 3 months ago. Security forces opened fire on tens of thousands of protesters in the Budgam and Tangmarg areas. The protests were particularly intense following the news of the desecration of the Quran in the U.S. Tens of thousands of people were out in the streets protesting against Indian rule. On Sunday, India imposed a curfew in many areas of Kashmir, but people have been taken to the streets across the region despite the rolling curfews. The latest round of public outrage began after a government forces tear gas grenade killed a teenager back in June. Scores of protesters and bystanders have lost their lives during the unrest. Each death has triggered further protests in defiance of strict all-day curfews. Tens of thousands of people have been killed in 2 decades of anti-Indian rural unrest in Muslim-majority Kashmir. The region is divided between India and Pakistan by a ceasefire line monitored by the United Nations and claimed by both. 2 wars have been fought by India and Pakistan over Kashmir since Islamabad's independence back in 1947, and now analysts fear that rising tensions may trigger another conflict in the region.
Well, we're going to discuss this more. Joining us from London, we have Muzzammil Ayyub Thakur, who's the Executive Director of the World Kashmir Students Association, joining us. Muzzammil Ayyub Thakur, thanks for joining us in this Press TV News Analysis. Now, this time around, the deaths are alarmingly high for one day. I'm sure you've heard some reports indicating this may be, in part, attributed to protests over the burning of Muslims' holy book, the Quran, in the United States. In your opinion, do you think that's the case, or have Indian forces actually upped their force on the protesters?
India have simply found another reason to start killing Kashmiris again. It's as simple as that. They have found the fact that people's sentiments, they have made this issue a communal issue, whereas Kashmiris generally are not communal people. We are a very civilized race. We have been, our entire history is based on the fact that we have a Sufi mentality, a Sufi culture. We do not have the mannerisms of those that India do. This issue in America, obviously it is a sensitive topic. It's a religious issue. 95% of the people in Kashmir are Muslims, and therefore it is a sensitive issue. But that is no reason to shoot them, to kill them. I have friends there that were in the situation in the area itself, and they mentioned to me that nearly 30 people themselves, they saw nearly 30 people being killed and scores being injured. The army, the police, they do not allow anyone to go to the hospital. They do not allow anyone to receive aid. They do not allow anyone to move. They're simply irrationally killing people. This is a form of genocide. And unfortunately, recently, PressTV have been doing a wonderful job in reporting the issues in Kashmir. And then India have banned PressTV in Kashmir as well. What kind of democracy is this? It's a fake democracy. Complete genocide in Kashmir. Human rights violations in Kashmir. And now there is a media gag in Kashmir, not just because of local media, but even international media. Such TV stations such as PressTV, which are doing a wonderful job. Unfortunately, India are not allowing anyone to view the realities inside Indian-occupied Kashmir. They do not wish anyone to realize that there are human rights violations going on. They do not wish anyone to realize that there are draconian laws being issued. They do not wish to show anyone the fact that people are uprising against this oppression, this severe oppression, where many people around the world have also supported various causes, for example, the Palestinian cause, for example, the Kosovan cause. It is high time that the international community focuses their attention on Kashmir. Otherwise, India must face the repercussions of the Kashmiri people. We are a peaceful nation, but you cannot back us into a corner for the rest of our lives. 63 years have gone by. The desecration of the Holy Quran is a small issue in this situation in Kashmir. It just was touching the nerves of the Kashmiri people, and obviously, as you can see afterwards, people were raising pro-freedom slogans. It is simply a mask over the world's and international community's eyes to show that Kashmiris are a communal people. We are not a communal people. We are a human-natured kind of people. We are sensitive people. We are welcoming to outsiders. We are welcoming to our own people. But unfortunately, India seems to be murdering us mercilessly, committing genocide. Where is the international media? Where are the international legends? People like Nelson Mandela, people like Desmond Tutu. Where is Tony Blair, who advocates human rights, who advocates the peace in the Middle East? Where is everyone else in the world? Why is it that only I see PressTV are doing the only decent job out there? And now even PressTV are being banned inside Kashmir. Where is the world?
Well, that is the question, isn't it? I mean, it does appear that the world community actually is maintaining somewhat of a guilty silence over the issue of Kashmir. Why does it seem that the West, it seems, at least to many analysts, is giving preference to India over listening to the cries of the Kashmiri pro-independence protesters? Why do you think that has come into their line of thinking when it comes to the Kashmir issue?
I feel that they are, if anything, they are more economic reasons than anything else. What else could they possibly be? India is a booming economy at the moment. They will possibly overtake certain other countries. I mean, if you look at the raw materials that India have, if you look at the army that India have, the West obviously would consider, for military purposes, India is a perfect location. You have the Afghan issue, you have the issues in Iraq, you have the Chinese problem for the Americans, for the West. You have economic turbulence in this time, in this troubled time, economic times. And of course, India is a huge financial player in this market. India would provide a tremendous amount of aid, if you will, to the West, to anybody. I mean, cheap labor, cheap intellect, cheap visions, and even the cheap government itself. The government itself is cheap. I mean, they are bought out and they are corrupt. It is one of the most corrupt nations in the world. Why would why would a country not wish to do business with India? The fact that they can buy anything, whereas in the West, I don't know whether this is the complete truth or not, but I have not been able to witness corruption on such a grand scale. In India, corruption is everywhere. And if you wish to get any deal passed, if you wish to get any policy passed, pay a few rupees, pay a few pennies, and you can get anything you wish done. You can even buy an entire government if you wish, as they have done in Kashmir.
Let's move on to the issue of corruption, which is something I want to touch on. I want to bring in our guest from Srinagar who joins us on the phone, Professor Nur Ahmad Baba, who's a who works at the Political Science University as a professor, joining us from Srinagar. Professor Nur Ahmad Baba, thanks for joining us. Our guest in London just mentioned corruption. Many people in Jammu and Kashmir are victims of corruption. It's noted that if a child is arrested under the Public Safety Act, he can be put away for 2 years, unless you can pay a bribe, the family. Everything seems to have a price there. So why, with these kinds of reports, why has India not done anything in this respect?
Done anything for what?
Regarding the corruption and the example that I just cited, based on a report in which a child is arrested under the Public Safety Act, and he can be put away for 2 years unless a bribe is paid.
Actually, I'm not exactly getting, I'm not getting, understanding you, what you want to say exactly.
We're talking about corruption. If you can name some examples, I just named one of many examples in which India does not have a proactive stance, amongst them being the inhumane treatment that is occurring there in Kashmir.
See, corruption, I think, is not only a problem in the whole of the subcontinent is afflicted with corruption. Corruption is there in India, corruption is there in Pakistan, and corruption is there in Kashmir. This is the problem of underdevelopment. I think that I would relate corruption with that. But it's not something specific in Kashmir. But of course, Kashmir, it has been there at a larger scale. If you are asking a question of corruption, I don't see there is typical of Kashmir or typical of India, typical of it's whole in in all parts of South Asia. Corruption has been there, and it's been part of the process of the underdevelopment that has taken place because of the colonization.
Muzzammil Ayyub Thakur, let's talk about a few examples that you mentioned, and the human rights activists. They have said that the Armed Forces Special Powers Act, this is the one that grants powerful search and seizure powers, is often misused by Indian police and paramilitaries. Although this is up for review by India, is India genuine in this matter, do you think?
If India were genuine in any matter, for the last 63 years, the Kashmir issue would have been solved by now. Unfortunately, I have no hope in India solely solving this Kashmir issue. In regards to the Armed Forces Special Powers Act, I still have hope that they will go to the table, they'll negotiate, they'll revoke such draconian laws, as well as the PSA Act, where, as you mentioned, people as young as the age of 6 or 8, where I have personally seen people at these ages who have been arrested and locked away for 2 years. And there are many other people who were locked away for 14 years. But in regards to the AFSPA Act, I do hope that they revoke it. And in regards to whether they are serious about it, one can only guess, one can only hope, and we will see in the days to come.
You talked about the outlook that India has on the young pro-independent protesters. Now, India has portrayed them as, and I'm quoting some officials here, stone-throwing youths that are illiterate, that India has suggested that economic development and jobs are the key to getting these people off the streets. But they are not illiterate. There are examples here, one of which this person who regularly joins these protests, and he has an MBA and he has a well-paying job. So there is this misperception, again, as introduced and portrayed by India, about these stone-throwing youths being uneducated, in which they're not.
India is a failed state. They failed the entire country, and now they're trying to portray that Kashmiris are also useless. We have one of the highest education ratios in the entire subcontinent. I mean, we have MBAs, we have civil engineers, we have some of the most senior people that you can fathom. I mean, not just inside Kashmir. People that are educated outside of Kashmir and then come back to Kashmir. It is a different issue that there are no jobs. But this is not the issue, this is not the core crux of the issue that the Kashmiris are not being able to work. The Kashmiris are not being able to find jobs. The people of Kashmir are not being able to earn a living. The fundamental core, at the end of the day, is freedom, is the right to self-determination. At least the right to self-determination, as well as revoking these draconian laws, and also, the most important thing, the human rights issues. But in terms of the education of our Kashmiri youths, we are very, very educated people. It doesn't take an illiterate person to go to the streets to demand freedom. If anything, it takes the most intellectual person to understand that they have a fundamental right in this day and age, to demand their right to self-determination, to demand freedom, to be unshackled from the jaws of subjugation. This is a joke. India have simply now they're making silly claims now. This is a joke now. India have become a complete non-entity in the world stage. Now making silly accusations of people that are uneducated. As you yourself have just said, that people are MBAs. I have friends, I have relatives in Kashmir that are working in very, very senior positions, making very, very good money. It doesn't mean that they are illiterate. And even if we look at the ratios, just looking at the ratios, India themselves, if we consider, just for a moment, that Kashmir is a part of India, look at the ratios.
We've unfortunately reached the end of this topic. We appreciate that. Executive Director of World Kashmir Students Association, those were the statements of Muzzammil Ayyub Thakur. Thanks for your statements.